In this lesson, we're going to begin working on the hands. Alright, so with character modeling, the hands can be one of the most difficult parts to model, simply because we have the four fingers and then the thumb, and they all have to go into the palm of the hand. And once we get to the palm of the hand and we finish that, we have to connect it to the wrist, which can be quite a bit of a challenge as far as topology goes. Now, we're not going to worry about how many polygons we have in the wrist, because what I've done is we've created the arm with 8 different edges. And I find that if you use that amount of edges, you're usually pretty good with the hand. You only have a few triangles here and there in the hand with that amount as far as connecting it to the wrist. So to get started with the hand, I always like to build out a single finger first. So to get started with this, we're going to go to our Create panel, and we're going to go into our front view. And I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to try to create it about the width of the finger, right around at that point. And I'm going to drag that out, make sure that you get your height. Notice how it's fluctuating. So when you create that in the front view, you need to make sure you left click one more time to finalize that. Now once we've done that, let's take our rotation tool, and I'm going to rotate it in the X direction 90 degrees. Okay, so there we have a pretty good base for our finger. Now, before we do anything, we need to make sure that we have enough sides. Right now we have 18 sides on this, and that's going to be way too many. So let's take this down to 8 instead. 8 is usually a pretty good number to rely on if you're unsure of how many segments you're going to need as you go. It gives you enough geometry to start out with, and gives you plenty of room to add to, and you also have plenty of room to take away if needed. Now I'm also going to get rid of these height segments. I always like to start out with a cylinder with 0 height segments, and I'll add in exactly what I need. Okay, so to start this out, let's go ahead and convert it to editable poly. And then I'm going to go into polygon mode, hitting 4 on the keyboard, and then I'm going to select this polygon right along the bottom. Now, if you'll remember, if we can use our window crossing toggle, we can actually turn on window selection mode, and anything that is completely encompassed by our select region tool will only be selected. So only that polygon is being selected at this point because of that. So let's go ahead and raise this up. I'm going to hit Alt X to go to see-through mode, and then we're just going to come in and we're going to move these points around. Now before we do that, let's turn off polygon mode, hitting 4 on the keyboard, and let's rotate it a little bit. Let's hit, I'm sorry, not 4 but 6, turn off polygon mode, go back to object mode. So 6 will do that for you. Alright, so let's rotate the cylinder in this direction, and then we'll go back to polygon mode and start working. I'm going to take this polygon and rotate it to where we're back at 90 degrees, pointing straight down, and then I'm going to use my extrude tool. Okay, so let's use our extrude settings, and we'll hit OK on that, and I'm just going to grab my move tool and put that back into position. So we'll put that at the bottom of the finger here, and actually, you know what, I'll put it right here in the middle, because I'm trying to block out the knuckles for the character here. So let's go ahead and scale this. Make sure we scale it in all 3 directions, so grab it right here along the middle of the scale tool and pull that down, and then we'll pull our polygon back across to match, and then we're going to extrude one more time, hit OK, and then pull that straight up in the Y to the bottom of that finger, and then we're going to go ahead and scale again, and we'll pinch that in there. Now I'm going to pull it just above the tip of the finger because we need to round out the tip of the finger. We can't deal with just this flat bottom here. So to round this out a little bit better, we're going to go to vertex mode, and I'm going to do a little bit of cutting on this finger. So I'm going to cut, if I take a look at the side here, or the top, I'm going to cut from this top line to the very top of the finger, and we're going to cut right down the middle of that. So it's going to go from this vertex here straight across to this vertex. Let's hit Alt X to make that a little bit easier to see. So with those 2 vertices selected, let's right click and use connect, and then we're going to right click and cut from this vertex to this vertex. Okay. Let's also use our X view. So I'm going to hit Alt V, which is a custom keyboard shortcut. So if you didn't load those high poly keyboard shortcuts, it's not going to pull this up. Let's hit update, and it says there are 0 vertices overlapping, so we're good. If you want to learn how to bring up that X view without the keyboard shortcut, you can hit X on the keyboard and it'll bring up this search. And you can search all actions this way. So you could actually type in X view, and then you have 2 options, cycle forward or cycle backward. You can hit cycle forward and then click on the top method, and you can choose in a list here of what you want. So here's overlapping vertices, and you can click here to update. Okay, let's hit Alt-V to turn that off. Alright, so now let's move this vertex down. Now if I move this straight down, you'll notice that it gives me kind of a, it's round, but it's not as round as I would like it. I want it to be a little more than that. So what I'm going to do, in my front view, I'm going to pull that vertex down anyway. But I'm also going to come in and grab those polygons. Okay, so make sure we have all those selected. And then we're going to use inset. So when I inset this, let me pull my amount down. So that way we get a nice spread there. And I'm going to go about halfway. And then I'm going to hit OK. Then I'm going to scale that in all 3 directions. Okay, and I'm going to scale that outward. Okay, let's take that set of polygons down, and then we're going to take this vertex here at the bottom up. Then we're going to take all of those and just push them forward a little bit. So it's going to be flat right here across the tip, but we've rounded out this finger. So now I can come in, I can pull this down a little bit. Okay, and we've got a nice round finger. Let's take these vertices here, and let's pull those up. So whenever we smooth this out, it's going to smooth out really nicely. Alright, so now we've got the base for our finger. And now what we need to do is we need to start modeling that in such a way to resemble a finger. So we're missing the knuckles, we're missing the fingernail, and things like that. So to get started with this, let's hit Alt, or let's select our object first off, and let's hit Control, Shift, Alt, and S. Or Control-Shift-S to bring up our Swift Loop tool, or go to Edit, Swift Loop, either way. And then we're going to hold down Shift, and then we're going to click on these points, and I'm going to basically cut these polygons in half. Now on this one up here at the top, I'm just going to left click. I'm not going to hold down Shift on that one. Let's come in and go to Edge Mode, hitting 2 on the keyboard, and let's double click on this edge to select that loop, and I'm going to pull that back. And we're going to start to round this out a little bit more. Then I'm going to double click on this edge, and I'm actually going to use chamfer. I'm going to split that, and I'm going to add a segment in there just to make sure that that stays round. And I'm going to pull that a little bit closer. And then we'll hit OK. So now we've got all of the topology we need for our finger to fit nicely. But then at this point, I also need to start working on the overall shape of the finger. If you look in the left view, that finger is really, it's not formed very well. So let's double click on this edge. I'm going to hit R to go to my scale tool, and I'm going to scale in all 3 directions, start pulling that in. Let's do the same thing here. And then here, we're going to skip past that. That's going to be the knuckle. And we're going to pull that in just a little bit. Same thing with this one. So we get a nice little shape here. Now, with female fingers, they really don't have this pronunciation normally in like stylized or cartoony type of characters. But I want to put that in there just to give it a little bit of shape, because I think fingers look funny on male or female if they don't have a nice silhouette shape here. So that's just my personal preference. If you want to make sure, or if you want to make the finger just really straight and without that topology, you're more than welcome to do so. But I've built that in with my character here, so I just think it makes it look more interesting. So now I'm going to finish out with the fingernail. So let's go to polygon mode, hitting 4 on the keyboard, and let's select these 4 polygons, and we're going to use the inset tool, and we're going to scale that back down to 0, and we're going to pull that in just a little bit, so 0.05. Then I'm going to extrude that, and we're going to make that a very small extrusion. And I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to scale that in on the Z and the Y. So I could have done bevel there as well. Either way would have worked. So now that I have this, let's take this vertex. I'm going to push that back a little bit, kind of flatten it out toward the back of the fingernails. Let's make sure that we grab both corners here. And we're actually going to push those underneath here. So if you take a look at your fingernail actually goes up underneath the skin. So that's what we're creating with this polygon. We're creating that skin, and then the fingernail comes up over the top here. So now let's take a look at what we have by hitting Turbo Smooth. Get a nice look to the finger. I'm going to go ahead and change the color and material just to make that a little bit easier to see and inspect. And we're going to turn on Isoline Display and then bump that up to 2. Let's hit F4 to turn that off, and you can see the shape that you get. Now with cartoon characters, the fingernails really aren't that pronounced. If you want to add a little bit more geometry to that, you're more than welcome to. Let's come in. I do want that to be pushed in just a little bit more. And I'm also going to scale that in the Y. Create that kind of shape there. And then let's take a look at our Turbo Smooth. And we've got a little bit more of that indentation that's looking really good. So I'm happy with that so far. Okay, so we've got our first finger, and that's the index finger. While I'm here, I'm going to go to polygon mode and select that top polygon and delete it. So now what we're going to do is, in the next lesson, we're going to take this finger, we're going to duplicate it, get those fingers positioned properly, and then we're going to also create the thumb. And then after that, we're going to start connecting everything together to get the palm. So we'll get started on that next.